Hey, Stolen Cousins. You already know what time it is. Animated horror stories. Animated horror stories. Where we at? We at SSG Animation's house. At Cousin SSG house. You know they be getting crazy. Sometimes they be throwing in the little clip at the end as well, just like IMR, and they be like, "This is based on a true story." Like what? Stop playing with us! Stop playing with us! So let's get on into it. For True Cabin Horror Stories Animated, y'all go support to their page. Like this video. Go like their video. Their their page is linked in the bio. So yeah, as I always say, if you want to watch their stuff with them, feel free. Just make sure you come back and watch it with me as well. So let's go on and go. Let's go on and get on and do it. Please grab a blunt, grab a bottle of water so you can have something to be hydrated with. It's getting hot outside, y'all. Please stay hydrated. Grab a bag of chips, have something in your stomach, and please grab a blanket so you can be snug. And let's get on into here, y'all. For cabin horror stories, like have we done cabin? I think we've done like motel. I don't know if we've done cabin yet. We'll see. I'll see. Y'all know we be doing stuff. Look at them. Mm, get crazy. Get crazy, SS. SSG.
My name is Samantha,
You ain't got no
and
arms?
I was born without arms.
That's so rude. That's so rude of me. That's so rude of me. I apologize, Samantha.
My name is Samantha,
Mm-hmm.
and I was born without arms.
Oh no.
Because of this, I use my feet for everything. From writing to opening doors to preparing meals, my feet are essentially my hands, so wherever I go, I'm usually barefoot.
Mm.
Despite my deformity, I was able to meet the man of my dreams and get
Oh,
married.
that's lovely.
Unfortunately, it didn't last long, and I ended up divorcing him
He's
after
a
I caught him
cheat.
cheating.
He's a bastard.
Oh yeah, and I was 6 months pregnant with his child.
While he was cheating? Ugh.
If my life so far sounds like a tragedy, don't feel too bad about it. I didn't let any of that get me down.
Good shit,
I was
girl.
happy that I had a child on the way and was looking forward to being a mom. And as for the cheating husband, I just took that as a learning opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll pick my partners better in the future.
Of course.
After the divorce, I moved into a small cabin in the woods, thinking it
Why?
would be a perfect place to raise a child. My parents wanted me to live with them, since they thought raising a child alone was too difficult for me. But I was a stubborn woman, so I refused.
Probably not live with them, but just a little closer,
The
girl.
cabin was pretty cheap, and after taking a
Of
walk
course it's
inside,
cheap.
I could see why. It was worn, dilapidated, dusty, and just plain creepy to look at. But I was certain I could make it work. The first few days inside the cabin were
Let's
pretty
clean it.
normal. I was mostly cleaning the place up while doing what I call floor checks on every level. Basically, I would slide the sole of my foot across the floor, searching for rusty nails that could be sticking up, which I could
Mm.
easily step on, as well as rotted floorboards and other trip hazards.
Good
Being a
shit.
pregnant woman who was always barefoot, I needed to make sure that every floor was safe to walk on, so my
Good
feet
shit.
didn't get cut to ribbons.
Mm-hmm.
That's how my days were spent. The nights, however, were a different story. Each night after I crawled into bed and turned off the lights, I would hear a strange shriek coming from the kitchen downstairs. It
Girl,
never lasted
you don't
longer than
need
a
to
few
go and check.
minutes, but it was unnerving to me the first time I heard it. I wondered what kind of animal could make such a horrible sound. But
did.
whenever I got out of bed to investigate, the sound would just stop, like whatever was making the sound knew I was trying to find it. Since I wasn't a superstitious person, I just chalked it up to raccoons and thought nothing of it.
Not
The
demons?
shrieking stopped after the 4th
You
week.
don't have to be superstitious to believe
On the
in
5th
demons.
week, the cabin finally looked like a decent home. But my
Aw.
pregnancy was starting to take its toll on my body, and there were a few symptoms I was not prepared for. Walking became increasingly difficult for me, so most of my days were spent lying in bed, with my bare feet elevated to prevent swelling. In addition to having weird cravings and a big belly, I also couldn't close my legs without hurting myself. Seriously,
the baby's
even
almost
crossing my
coming.
legs was an impossible chore.
Yeah.
So, for the sake of
pushing on
comfort,
the bottom.
I had to keep my legs spread as far apart as possible at all times of the day. Yeah,
Girl, you need to
never
call
saw
your
that
parents
depicted in
to
TV
come.
shows with pregnancy. Hobbling around with my legs open, looking like I had to use the bathroom all the time, was embarrassing. And it was also difficult to cook food like that. So, as much as I hated to admit it, I needed an extra set of hands to help
You
take
call your
care of
mama and
me and the
daddy?
cabin. I called my cousin Morgan, and she was more than happy to move in with me, taking the spare bedroom across from mine. Growing up, Morgan was always a big sister to me. She was very tomboyish and tough as nails, so having her around definitely made me feel safer.
Okay. That's
For the next
explainable.
few days,
I would've called my
Morgan
mama and
cooked my
daddy.
meals and did the chores that I no longer could. Meanwhile, my symptoms
okay.
worsened. 99% of the time I was lying on my back, legs
Yeah, that
wide
baby
open
is
and feet in
coming.
the air, like I was going into labor or something. And as much as I hated being in such a vulnerable position, my cousin did everything to make me feel comfortable and safe. Although, she couldn't resist cracking the occasional joke about how unladylike my pose was, to which I would just grab a pillow with my foot and throw it at her face. Things started getting weird when I was organizing some boxes in the basement. The light above my head suddenly went out, leaving me in total darkness.
She's
And since
too
I had
pregnant
to
for
climb a
this.
flight of stairs to get out, I was pretty much trapped. Morgan, can you come down here, please? I called out before moving my foot around, pushing boxes out of my way. When I took one step forward, my foot landed on what felt like the palm of a human hand.
Oh,
It was
hell
soft
no.
and warm, and so it was definitely a living person's hand.
Hell
And as soon as my
no.
foot made contact with it,
It grabbed
the
you?
hand clutched shut, grabbing the bottom of my foot.
No.
I squealed as I
don't.
jumped backwards, falling flat on my back with a loud thud.
Ugh.
I then hastily raised both of my feet in the air like I was ready to kick a potential intruder.
Good.
Just then, Morgan came in and flipped on a light switch. "What are you doing in here?" she asked. I quickly glanced around the brightly lit room, but to my surprise, there was no one else there. "Someone was just in here. I stepped on their hand," I exclaimed, still keeping my feet in the air.
I'm too pregnant
"Maybe
for all
you
this.
stepped on a rotted floorboard. Those can feel pretty soft, too,"
No.
Morgan
She
replied.
did the check when she first moved in,
I know she
girl.
was just trying to find a rational explanation, but I knew the difference between a hand and a rotted floorboard.
Like, for real.
I've been
but,
walking
all right.
barefoot around this cabin for 2 months now, so
I'm
I knew
saying.
every inch of the place like the back of my hand.
Like, come on
But
now.
since she wouldn't believe me, I didn't push the matter any further. Later that night, when it was time to get out of bed, I was a little on edge, thinking a possible intruder was living inside the cabin.
Because who the hell
I
is
looked
that?
around my dark bedroom, expecting someone to jump out at me. And that's when I saw a silhouette of someone standing in my doorway. Get out!" I screamed as I raised my feet in the air once more.
It's not Morgan?
That's when the figure turned on the lights, revealing itself to be Morgan. "Why didn't you say anything?
Like, for real.
I was scared," I shouted at her. "You didn't really give me a chance to say anything before you started yelling," she replied.
So,
"I could have hurt you," I said back. Morgan let out a giggle after that. Oh, really? She then looked at me with a raised brow and smug grin. I was visibly trembling from head to toe, unable to sit up or
And this is
even
why
get
you should
out
have
of
just
bed
called
on
your
my
mama
own.
and daddy.
And the soles of my feet were still raised in the air, pointing directly at her.
Just in case. You got
From where I'm standing, you look like you're about to pee yourself and start crying. She said with a smirk. Shut up, I said out of embarrassment.
Just call your mama and daddy, tell her to get out.
Morgan, despite her teasing remarks, knew I was scared and tried to comfort me. She walked up to my bed and sat down beside me, then gave me a warm hug. You don't have to be scared. I won't let anything happen to you.
Oh,
After
no,
I calmed down, she stayed with me the entire night, and I fell asleep moments later, feeling at ease. The next morning, the two of us drove into town to buy some groceries. When we got back, Morgan pulled up into the driveway, and I got out of the car first. Morgan stayed behind to look at her phone while I unlocked the front door, using the key I held between my toes. I then took several steps inside, only to hear a loud crunch followed by my right foot falling through a hole in the floor. Damn it, I groaned. I thought I checked all the floorboards.
You did.
I tried to pull my foot out, but it was stuck. Great. Not only was my foot stuck, but it was the same foot that was holding the keys to the cabin. I tightened my grip on the keys with my toes because if I dropped them, I'd be out of luck. I was about to call out for Morgan when I heard that all too familiar animalistic screech from a few weeks back.
And the
I've never heard it in the day before, and it was so much clearer this time. It was coming from beneath the floorboards. My face went pale when I realized that the mystery creature was living under the cabin the whole time and now had easy access to my bare foot. I immediately began tugging at my leg, frantically trying to pull it out, but I wasn't making much progress. Morgan! I squealed in terror as the mysterious creature crawled closer and closer. I couldn't see it through the floorboards, of course, but I could definitely hear the snapping of its joints as it moved below the floor with incredible speed. Tears began running down my cheeks as I panicked.
Morgan, you said you wouldn't let
Having my
nothing get
entire
her.
foot trapped underground with God knows what coming to devour it was beyond nightmare-inducing.
Put your leg back
Using
down
as
in
much
it and then
strength
twist
as I
and
could
then come
muster
back.
up, I managed to yank my foot right out of the hole,
Ooh, good
falling
God.
flat on my back in the process.
You
And
gotta
by the
stop
sounds of
falling.
the creature below, I made it just in time. Thankfully, it didn't climb out of the hole to come get me, probably because the sun was still out. Morgan came inside soon after with the remaining groceries. She looked down at me with concern as I lay on the floor, breathing heavily with an expression of panic on
You
my
need to give
face.
her a better concern face.
My foot was still shaking in the air as the house keys were held between my toes.
Good shit.
What's wrong? What happened? She asked as she put the groceries down and knelt beside me. With a shaky voice, I tried to tell her that there was something inside the hole in the floor. I could tell she didn't believe me, but she knew I was scared, so she wrapped her arms around me lovingly. All right, I'll call an exterminator first thing tomorrow morning. I would have preferred she call a priest, but an exterminator was a good start.
Either or.
I wish
call
I
them
could
both.
say it ended there, but things only got worse from then on.
Damn. We needed more. It only got worse from then on? Like, what happened? Did you have your baby and then it got worse? Or what?
My name is
y'all.
Ellie. I'm a 20-year-old
Hey,
college
Ellie.
student, and I'm going into my third year.
Okay.
Before the summer break is over, Faye, Victoria, Angie, and myself are going to Angie's parents' cabin to spend a girls' weekend of relaxation by the lake before going back to school. I begged my dad to let us take his Jeep, and he said yes on the condition it comes back in the exact condition I drove it in. Easy enough. We're not crazy off-roaders. I drove with the roof off, and all of us girls took in the smell of mountain and lake air. How much longer? Faye asked from the back seat. We should be there in about 5 minutes, Angie said patiently from the passenger seat. I'm starving, Victoria whined. I tossed my half-eaten can of Pringles back to her, and she thanked me with a smile. True to Angie's word, we were pulling up within minutes. We all got out and grabbed bags of food in our suitcases. We stepped inside the cabin and gasped as we looked around. It was gorgeous and massive. I get the master bedroom. You three can fight over which ones have to share a room, and a lucky one to have the other guest room to yourself, Angie said as she dragged her suitcase up the stairs. Rock, paper, scissors? Faye suggested. Best 2 out of 3, Victoria said as she balled a fist against the palm of her other hand. I won the guest room to myself, and Victoria and Faye wound up having to share. That night, I would never want to stay alone in a room at that cabin ever again. We got ourselves some lunch and went out to the deck to sunbathe. We got in the water and splashed around for a bit before heading back in to make some dinner and do skincare night and binge junk food while we watched chick flicks. Angie insisted we started with Mean Girls. As we watched the movie, the scene where Lindsay Lohan burst through the door on her friends while they were watching a scary movie and they screamed. When we heard a scream outside. Did you guys hear that? I asked. Angie paused the movie. We thought maybe we had too much caffeine from our sodas and were hearing things when nothing else sounded. I had the popcorn bowl in my hands when suddenly there was a pounding on the door. I jumped so hard, popcorn flew everywhere. Angie and Victoria went to the door together to look outside. There wasn't anyone there. The rest of the movies went on without incident, as did the next 2 movies we watched. By the time the 3rd movie was over, we had forgotten all about it for the most part, and we all dragged ourselves upstairs to bed. We all brushed our teeth in the bathroom, and I went off to enjoy a plush, queen-size bed to myself. I opened the window a crack to let some of that fresh mountain air in while I slept. But that would be a mistake. I played a game on my phone while I settled down before my eyes got tired and I dozed off. I jumped awake a bit later at the sound of something hitting my window. I got up to see what could have hit it from that high up. The window was cracked, and as I approached it, a large rock hit it, causing it to crack a little more. I looked out the window, and down below my window was a man. He looked up at me with an unnaturally wide smile on his face. He then ran up to the side of the building and began to climb up the ladder used as a fire escape. I screamed and slammed the window shut and locked it. I ran and barged into the master bedroom. Angie, there's a man outside! Angie shot up with her sleep mask on and lifted it. What? She said groggily. Girl! A man is climbing up the fire escape ladder. We need to call the police, I shouted. We then heard Victoria and Faye screaming from the other room, followed by the sound of tearing flesh, and their screams turned into gurgling, as though someone ripped their throats out. Oh, God! I cried as Angie rushed to the door to lock it. Stay calm, Ellie, she said as she grabbed her phone and dialed the police. We need the police here, quick! There's a man inside the cabin, and I think he's already killed 2 of my friends. She gave them the address just as the man started kicking the door with brute force. He kicked it right off its hinges, and he stood there staring at us with blood all over his mouth and hands. The man's eyes were wide and red as he held up his index finger and dragged it across his throat in a slashing motion and let out the most disturbing laugh I have ever heard. He moved closer to us, and we backed up until our backs hit the glass doors that led to the balcony. Angie fumbled with the lock. She got it undone, and before we could think better of it, both of us ran out onto the balcony and jumped off.
Smart girls.
We were only about a story high, so the fall wasn't fatal, but high enough to knock the wind out of us. The adrenaline rush allowed us to get up and run for the Jeep. Thankfully, I had left the keys in the ignition as we were out in the wilderness. Angie and I climbed in. I started it up and peeled out of there. The bloodthirsty man chased us down, but we lost him after a bit. The police arrived and found the man passed out in the bushes down the road. Victoria and Faye were found with their throats ripped out.
You took a nap, you bastard?
They also found a couple that were camping under the stars he had murdered that night. That explained the screams we heard, and the girl ran to our cabin and pounded on the door. The man took her before we could answer. After some testing, they found out that the man was on an acid trip that caused him to hallucinate. What he thought he saw in me or my poor friends that he slaughtered, we will never know. Angie and I stayed friends, and we never went camping again.
I'm terrified of the woods. The thought of being alone in the forest at night when it's pitch black scares me to death. But I was never this scared of the forest till it all happened that fateful snowy night a couple of years ago. My dad and I were very close, so when he passed away in a plane crash, it was tough on me and my mom.
Oh.
We were a small family of 3 that deeply cared about one another. After Dad was gone, I looked after my mom. Back then, I was just 19, and it was tough to deal with the grief of losing him so unexpectedly. We lived in the city, but Dad had built a cabin in the mountains when I was a baby. The cabin was a quick escape for us on weekends and holidays when we wanted to get away from the city.
Oh, beautiful.
The mountains are just a 3-hour drive from our home and a nice place to spend a few days in the presence of nature.
Just 3 hours?
So, when my dad died, my mom and I decided to sell the cabin as we needed the money. And it was tough for us to visit the place as a lot of memories were attached to it. However, before we put up the place for sale, I wanted to spend a day or 2 there as a last goodbye to my father. That cabin was a place where I bonded with him a lot, be it while chopping wood or while swimming in the waterfall below. Visiting the cabin for the last time felt like the right thing to do. When I told my mom about my plan, she was more than willing to let me go. I decided to drive there and spend the weekend. I packed my bags, stuffed them in my car, and left for the cabin. After driving for about 3 hours, I parked my car at the base of the mountain and started the hike upwards. Dad had intentionally chosen this spot as it had a great view of the valley below.
I love a good view.
At night, when it was quiet, you could hear the waterfall too. The cabin was built on a slope, so the back side of it was completely attached to the mountain. When I reached the cabin, I was too tired from the drive and then the hike, so I slept for a few hours.
As you should.
When I woke up, the sun was just setting, so I enjoyed a cup of coffee watching the sunset, just like I used to do with my dad. As the night fell and the woods started to grow dark and silent, I made a sandwich for myself and decided to watch a movie on the TV. The cabin was a 2-story structure. The ground floor had a big living room attached to an open kitchen, a toilet, and a bathroom. The upper floor was just a huge bedroom with a big balcony to enjoy the view. While I was watching TV in the living room, I felt as if someone was watching me from the French windows, which were to my left. At first, I ignored the feeling and continued watching the show. But after a while, I sensed as if I was being watched again. This went on for a good hour before I got up to investigate. I went in front of the closed French windows and opened one to look outside. I could see nothing but pitch darkness. A few trees could be spotted due to the light from the cabin, but there was no sign of a person or an animal anywhere. I still had the eerie feeling of being watched, although no one was in sight.
Close the curtain.
My dad often came here alone and stayed for days on end. That's when I remembered he had a hunting rifle somewhere in the cabin. I went upstairs and checked his closet, and there it was, the rifle on the first shelf. Dad always made sure that it was loaded and ready to use.
Good shit.
I picked it up and brought it downstairs with me and continued watching TV. After a while, I decided to sleep, so instead of sleeping on the small bed downstairs, I slept in the bedroom with the rifle right by my side. It was spooky enough to be here without my dad, but the thought of someone lurking in the vicinity, I felt safer with the rifle by my side. The next day wasn't much eventful. I spent the morning and afternoon cleaning and packing our stuff. Later, I went for a swim in the waterfall for the last time. Part of the reason we were selling the cabin was that we needed money, and part of it was because it would never be the same without Dad. Too many memories were attached to this place, and it would be emotionally draining to be here again. While I was relaxing in the cool water beneath the waterfall, it started to snow. I could tell a snowstorm was due that night, so I got back to the cabin. It was still daytime, so I could see everything outside. Very close to our cabin was a tall tree with several branches scattered in all directions. One of the branches loomed over our balcony and others over our roof. While I was in the bedroom, I think I saw a silhouette of a person standing on the balcony, but I was unsure and convinced my mind it must be the moving branches. The rest of the day I was on edge, looking out of the balcony or the French windows to spot someone, but I didn't see anyone. The snowstorm had started and there were sheets of snow all over. Later that night, when I was laying in the bed, the glass door to the balcony was closed and curtains were covering it. Suddenly, I could hear footsteps on my roof right above my head. Someone was walking over my home.
Grab your gun.
I was terrified, and I gripped my rifle and hid beneath the duvet. The walking continued for a few minutes. Then someone started scratching the roof and the walls of the house, while the snow still fell from the sky. It was unlike a human. A person would not be able to balance on such a steep roof while it snowed. It was definitely something unnatural, maybe even paranormal.
Demon.
I was clutching the rifle. It was about this time the creature would reach the balcony and the glass door. I was afraid to even breathe. The passing and scratching continued, as if this thing was trying to get into the house by digging a hole. I could hear occasional grunts like an animal. The creature was frustrated that it couldn't find a way to get in. Suddenly, the noise stopped, and for a millisecond, I thought the thing had gone. But right then, the branch that extended over our balcony moved, and there it was, an 8-foot-tall silhouette of a lanky man perched on it. He was staring at the balcony doors with his glowing eyes, which were unnatural for a human to have. Then slowly, he stepped onto my balcony, and the only thing separating me from this huge, tall forest man was the glass doors and the curtains. He started pacing on the balcony, flipping the tea table and the chairs. He was still trying to find a way in, but he couldn't look inside due to the curtains restricting his view. With the snowstorm still blazing outside, I sat there on my bed, huddled in the duvet with a rifle, ready to shoot the thing. A few hours passed by similarly. The creature was adamant and didn't give up until the first rays of sun grazed the sky. As the sun began to rise, the creature retreated into the forest. When I was sure that the being had left, I slowly stepped out onto the balcony, which was covered in a few inches of snow. And amidst the broken tables and chairs were big footprints. They didn't resemble any animal, not even a human. It was as if it was something in between. I decided to pack up and leave the cabin as soon as I could. Similar footprints were all around my car and the cabin. This creature was clearly trying to hunt me down, but luckily, I had escaped. When I got back home, I narrated the incident to my mom, and she was stunned to hear about it. She also informed me that a family was interested in purchasing the cabin. As a parting gift to the new owners of the cabin, I'd already left my dad's rifle on the first shelf of the closet,
daddy rifle
loaded. What must the creature be?
Rifle.
What do
could have
you
bought them a
guys
different
think?
one. Yo, daddy rifle.
The scariest moment of my life happened nearly 2 decades ago, and I still remember it perfectly. I was 9 years old then, and looking back, I'm left with more questions than answers.
We asking what happened.
I grew up in a small, quiet town, surrounded by woods. Everybody knew everybody. Nothing bad ever happened there. Life was good.
That's where the worst
You
stuff
get the
happens.
picture. Well, just outside
The worst stuff happens in them little towns where nothing happens.
Side of town was an old rundown cabin sitting atop a hill. A cabin which the kids called Dead Man's Cabin. It was called this because even though it hadn't been lived in for decades, you could sometimes see smoke rising from the chimney in the distance. Police officers used to go up there, expecting to find squatters. But every time they went inside, the place would be completely empty, and the fireplace would show no signs that it was ever used. Eventually, the police just stopped going up there and accepted the cabin as an unexplainable phenomenon.
Haunted.
People got it in their heads that a ghost was living there, and the name just stuck. Dead Man's Cabin also happened to be a 20-minute walk away from my house. Although it was obscured by trees, it could still be partially seen from my bedroom window. And since I lived the closest to the cabin, my friends would always ask me about it whenever they came over to spend the night. They'd ask if I could actually see the ghost through the window, or if I'd ever gone over there.
Why would I?
I'd always say no and change the subject. But on one particular night, my friends and I decided to be a bit more daring. We were having another one of our usual sleepovers, me and my two best friends, Mary and Diane, and we started talking about the cabin. I can't remember the specifics of our conversation,
but y'all went over there?
I do remember that our talk somehow turned into a game of truth or dare. Diane dared me to spend 5 minutes inside the cabin, and me, being the brave yet foolhardy kid that I was, accepted. But only on the condition that my friends joined me. Mary and Diane were visibly shaken by this, but since they didn't want to look like a bunch of scaredy cats, they agreed to go with me.
Come with me.
Living in a boring town like ours meant we had to look for adventure wherever we could, and a haunted cabin seemed like a nice change of pace. We were the type of kids who did whatever we wanted, no matter how dangerous it was, and getting the chance to meet a real-life ghost was all too exciting for me to pass up. We snuck out through my bedroom window and headed straight for the woods, dressed only in our pajamas and bare feet. We had to leave our shoes and jackets behind so my parents wouldn't catch on to the fact that we'd left the house.
You only got more than one pair of shoes.
Needless to say, we were all heavily underdressed for a hike, but that didn't matter to us at the time. Getting caught by my parents and possibly grounded for life was much worse than being out in the cold. Plus, we all had something to prove, and neither of us wanted.
Hey, in a black household, you gonna get grounded for both. You went out here and you look homeless? You're out here with no shoes on and no jacket, and it's cold outside? Yeah, girl, you're getting grounded forever. You don't ever have to worry about them little girls ever coming over our house. Like, you messed it up for yourself. You over here trying to be cool. You ain't never gonna be able to have the sleepover at your house. You're never hosting ever again. You might not even ever be able to go after this shit here. Going to whose house? No, you can't go over her house. Wasn't that the one that was over here and went to the damn haunted house with you? No, y'all can't even see each other.
Than being out in the cold. Plus, we all had something to prove, and neither of us wanted to back out of the challenge.
Y'all had something to prove to who? Each other?
I know, but that's how we rationalized it. Anyways, we pushed our way through the rough terrain and low-hanging branches, while staying as close to each other as possible. The constant chirping of crickets filled the air as twigs and leaves crunched under our feet. The scenery was admittedly creepy at night, and Mary kept looking over her shoulder every few seconds. But we all kept moving forward, determined to prove our bravery. When we finally reached the cabin, we walked up onto the porch and tried peeking in through the windows to see if anyone was home. All we saw was darkness, so we took that as a sign that it was safe to enter. Without hesitation, I reached for the knob and turned it before pushing the door open.
Without hesitation, or just
the three of us were then greeted by a warm fire crackling in the fireplace. Red flag number one.
There
definitely wasn't a fire going when we were looking through the windows a second ago, but now the whole cabin was well lit. We should have turned back right then and there.
Y'all still went in?
Since we'd been walking barefoot for over a mile in 30-degree weather, we were all too eager to warm up by the fire. We sat on the floor, huddled together, with our hands and feet out, when the front door suddenly slammed shut behind us.
And now y'all stuck in there.
We all jumped and turned our heads to the door, but saw nothing suspicious. It must have been the wind, Mary said in a shaky tone.
Shut up.
As if things weren't creepy enough, we also heard shuffling footsteps from the next room over and decided to investigate. Our curiosity was more powerful than our survival instincts, I guess. Diane led the way while Mary and I followed behind. We went down a long hallway filled with cobwebs and squeaky floorboards that creaked with every step we took. Looking down, I realized that some of the floorboards weren't nailed down and were just sitting there loosely.
Y'all gotta go. Y'all don't even got
I reached down and picked up one of the boards, leaving a dark rectangular hole in its place.
No.
Strange, I thought. Why would some of the floorboards be removable? Before I could ponder any further, a long, pale arm with a clawed hand reached out of the hole and grabbed my ankle. I let out a horrified scream as my foot was suddenly dragged down into the hole, along with my entire leg. My friends immediately rushed over and tried pulling me out, but whatever held me down wasn't letting go without a fight. My fear only worsened when I felt multiple sets of teeth begin to bite down on my exposed leg, as if it were a piece of meat. I squealed at the top of my lungs as I struggled violently to escape. A jolt of pain shot up my leg as more and more teeth clamped down on my thigh. I kicked as hard as I could until I felt my foot connect with someone's jaw. That seemed to do the trick, as the culprit let go of my ankle, allowing me to pull my foot out. My leg was riddled with teeth marks, but thanks to my flailing around, those teeth didn't break the skin. The three of us then quickly scrambled to our feet, but instead of running out the door, we peered down into the hole out of some morbid curiosity.
Oh, y'all some
our
stupid
eyes gradually
bitches.
adjusted to the darkness, and we all froze in sheer terror
Y'all
when
the
we saw
dumbest little
several
girls
pale
ever in
faces
the
looking back
world.
at us. They were people. People living under the floorboards. We saw men, women, even a few children among them.
Y'all dumb.
They were all pale
What are y'all
and
still
skinny,
looking for?
with
They're
red
about to try
eyes
to eat y'all
and
up.
mouths filled with rotten yellow teeth. They smiled at us before hungrily licking their lips,
Y'all
making their intentions all too clear. We all bolted for the front door, hopping over the hands as they continued to reach for us. The front door, thankfully, wasn't locked, so after swinging it open, we hightailed it out of there. As we ran through the woods, neither of us looked back to see if we were being chased. Fortunately, it didn't take us long to get back to my house, and the bedroom window was still open. We all climbed in one after the other, and I quickly shut the window behind us before locking it. I honestly can't tell you how we managed to get out of that place alive, or why those things even attacked us.
Girl,
lots of
why
people
they
went up to that
attacked you?
cabin
'Cause y'all
before
went
us,
up in there.
and they never mentioned being attacked.
How you
Not
know?
once.
Y'all was kids.
So what made us so special? I can only guess that due to their skeletal bodies, they were too weak to subdue adult travelers and passers-by. But when they saw three little girls in pajamas
They were
waltz
like,
into
hell
their
yeah.
home late at night, they figured we'd make an easier meal. Glad we proved them wrong. We never
Just
told our
barely.
parents what happened that night, mainly out of fear of getting in trouble.
Obviously,
And I moved
time,
away a year
sis.
later. I don't know if that cabin was ever torn down, or what became of those cannibals, but I certainly hope no one ever had to go through what we did.
Y'all went through that on your own regards. That was crazy, wasn't it? I love a good cabin horror story, like a horror movie cabin. We just watched the other Evil Dead, and that shit was crazy. Evil Dead Rising. Like, just watched it recently, and it was really good in my opinion. It was a lot to deal with, but so was Evil Dead normally. So I definitely enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was a long one, ain't it? But 1 through 4, which one was your favorite? I feel like the first two was good. I think we've seen 3, and then 4 just tied it right up with them little badass kids. Y'all be sure to tell y'all kids to not be so damn bad because they could die. Let them kids know that they could die. Like, them kids went in a cabin. Pissed me off is the light wasn't off when they got there. The light came back on and they was like, alright, bet, let's go up in here. The little girl's foot gets yoked through the hole, start getting bit, they get her out, and then they look in the hole? Like, no. 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 Someone needs to do better. Someone's mama needs to do better. Because what is y'all really, like, y'all understand me? I know y'all do, but y'all need to teach these kids. Because we're the adults now. We're the ones having them. So we have to pass this shit down to them. Show them this video. Tell them to be aware. Don't even do no shit that's scary. If it's too scary for you, it's probably too scary for me. And that's honest. Like, I have to kill the bug because you want me to, not because I want to. Like, you know what I mean? I hope you guys enjoyed the video, my loves. And until next time, bye.